A 65-year-old widower adopted 3 black sisters when no one else would. Years later, during his health crisis, they revealed a secret that left their entire community in tears. James Mitchell's hands trembled as he gripped the garden hose. The summer heat pressed down on his shoulders while he watered the withering roses his wife had planted 5 years ago. The flowers drooped despite his daily care, just like everything else in the house since Maria passed away. The phone rang inside. James dropped the hose, wiped his hands on his khaki pants, and shuffled through the back door. His shoes left muddy prints on the kitchen floor, something Maria would have scolded him for. "Hello." His voice cracked from disuse. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Hello, James? It's Patricia from the church." The familiar voice of the church secretary came through. "I hate to bother you, but we're short on volunteers at the children's shelter this afternoon. I remember you used to be a teacher." James glanced at his empty kitchen table. The newspaper lay unopened, his coffee cold. "What time? Could you come by around 2? Just for story time with some of the kids. I know it's last minute. I'll be there." The word surprised him as much as Patricia. "Oh, wonderful. Thank you, James. The children will be so pleased." He hung up and looked at his watch. 1:15 p.m. Enough time to shower and change. As he climbed the stairs, his knee protested, a reminder of his 65 years. The bathroom mirror showed a face he sometimes didn't recognize. Silver hair that needed a trim, gentle brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and deeper wrinkles than he remembered having. The children's shelter occupied an old Victorian house 2 blocks from the church. James parked his aging Volvo out front at 1:55 p.m. His palms sweat as he gripped the steering wheel. What did he know about entertaining kids? Sure, he taught high school English for 30 years, but teenagers were different. Patricia met him at the door, her round face flushed. "Thank goodness you're here. We've got a new group, 3 sisters. The oldest one's been challenging." James followed her through the narrow hallway. Children's artwork covered the walls, crayon drawings of houses, families, pets. One picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a rain of tears. The reading room held about 10 children scattered on beanbags and cushions. In the corner, 3 black girls sat together. The oldest, tall and protective, kept one arm around the smallest girl while shooting wary glances at everyone else. The middle sister's legs bounced with restless energy. "Everyone, this is Mr. Mitchell. He's going to read to us today." Patricia handed James a copy of Where the Wild Things Are and whispered, "Good luck," before leaving. James lowered himself into the reading chair, his knee cracking. The oldest girl whispered something to her sisters. The middle one rolled her eyes. "I'm not very good at doing voices," James admitted, opening the book. "But I'll do my best." "That's okay," the smallest sister said suddenly. "Our mom wasn't good at voices either." The oldest girl tensed. "Sarah?" "Sure." James looked at the 3 sisters. "What are your names?" "I'm Sarah." The youngest volunteered before her sister could stop her. "I'm 8. That's Jennifer. She's 14. And that's Melissa. She's 16. "Sarah," Melissa warned again. James nodded. "Nice to meet you all. I'm Mr. Mitchell. But you can call me James if you want." Jennifer snorted. "We won't be here long enough for it to matter what we call you." The words hit James in the chest. He remembered saying similar things in foster homes after his own parents died. He'd been 12, angry at the world. These girls had that same look, expecting disappointment, preparing for another rejection. He started reading, keeping his voice steady. The story unfolded, and despite their initial resistance, the sisters leaned forward. Even Jennifer's scowl softened. When Max sailed home to find his supper still hot, Sarah clapped. "Another one?" she begged. James checked the time. "I think we have time for one more." Melissa raised her hand hesitantly. "There's this one about a paper bag princess." "The paper bag princess?" Sarah bounced. "That's Melissa's favorite." Jennifer elbowed Sarah. "Was Melissa's favorite. When we were little." James found the book on the shelf. As he read, he watched Melissa mouth the words silently, her guard dropping slightly. The story ended, and the other kids filed out for snack time, but the sisters stayed. Sarah pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "I drew this in art time." She thrust it at James. The crayon drawing showed 5 people, 3 small figures, 1 tall one, and 1 with wings and a halo. "Is that your family?" James asked carefully. Sarah nodded. That's Mom in heaven. And that's... She faltered. Time for snacks, Melissa announced, standing abruptly. She gathered Sarah up, Jennifer following. James watched them go, the drawing trembling in his hands. Maria had always wanted children. They tried for years, endured treatments, losses. Now their house stood empty except for ghost memories and wilting roses. His phone buzzed. Patricia. Can you come again tomorrow? James typed yes before he could think twice. That night, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea, Sarah's drawing propped against the sugar bowl. The stick figures smiled up at him, the family she wished for floating on white paper. The house creaked around him, too quiet. On the wall, Maria's photo watched him with kind eyes. What do you think? He asked her picture. Too old to start over? Too set in my ways? The photo didn't answer. But James remembered what she always said. It's never too late to fill a home with love. He pulled his laptop closer and typed, "Requirements for senior citizen adoption in America." The cursor blinked. Outside, the roses waited for tomorrow's watering. And somewhere in the children's shelter, 3 sisters slept under the same roof. For now. James clicked search. The social services office smelled like coffee and printer paper. James sat straight-backed in an uncomfortable chair, facing 3 people across a metal desk. Ms. Thompson, the main social worker, Dr. Rodriguez, the family counselor, and Mr. Peters, the agency supervisor. Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Thompson began, shuffling papers. You're 65, single, retired, and you want to adopt 3 teenage girls. Yes. James fought the urge to fidget with his tie. 3 black teenage girls, Mr. Peters added, his tone flat. Yes. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. What makes you think you're equipped to handle this situation? James took a breath. I taught high school for 30 years. I know teenagers. I have a stable home, savings, and time to dedicate to them. Teaching teenagers and raising them are very different things, Ms. Thompson said, especially given the unique circumstances. You mean because I'm white and old? The words came out sharper than James intended. Mr. Peters' eyebrows rose. We have to consider cultural fit, Mr. Mitchell. These girls have specific needs. They need a home, James cut in. They need someone who won't separate them. How many families have passed them over because they only wanted 1 or 2? The social workers exchanged glances. Ms. Thompson checked her file. 7 families in the past year. 7 families who would have split them up, James said. I won't do that. Your wife passed away 5 years ago, Dr. Rodriguez noted. Have you considered that this might be a reaction to grief? James's hands tightened on his knees. Maria and I couldn't have children. We wanted them. Now I have a chance to give 3 girls a home. Yes, I've thought about my motivations. Every night for the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Mr. Peters frowned. That's not very long to consider such a major decision. Sometimes you just know. James pulled out his wallet, removed a folded paper. Sarah drew this. A family, with their mother watching over them. The social workers studied the drawing. Ms. Thompson's expression softened slightly. We'll need to do a home study, she said. Financial review, background checks, interviews with references. Whatever you need. And the girls would need to agree, Dr. Rodriguez added. All 3 of them. James nodded. Of course. Later that afternoon, James walked into Sunday service at his church. Whispers followed him to his usual pew. Did you hear? Mrs. Baker leaned over to Mrs. Collins. He's trying to adopt those 3 black girls from the shelter. At his age? Alone. Mrs. Collins shook her head. It's not right. James kept his eyes forward, but his neck burned. After the service, Patricia caught his arm. James, wait. She glanced around before lowering her voice. Is it true? Yes, but what will people think? I don't care what people think, Patricia. She frowned. The community talks. It could be hard on the girls. Harder than being separated, than bouncing between foster homes. Patricia had no answer for that. At the shelter that afternoon, James sat with the 3 sisters in the small garden. Sarah picked dandelions while Melissa and Jennifer watched him warily. Why? Jennifer demanded. Why us? James considered his answer carefully. Because you deserve to stay together. Because I have room in my home and my heart. Because I think we could be a family. You don't know anything about us, Melissa said. I'd like to learn. Sarah brought her dandelions to James. Can we see your house? Sarah. Both older sisters snapped. Actually, James said, that's why I'm here. If you want, the social workers approved a visit. Jennifer crossed her arms. What if we don't want to? Then that's your choice. All three of you have to agree. Melissa stuttered him. What about school? Our friends. You'd stay in the same school district. It's only 2 miles from here. Sarah tugged Melissa's sleeve. Can we? Please. The older girls had a silent conversation with their eyes. Finally, Melissa nodded. Just to look, James's neighbor, Mr. Harris, was watering his lawn when they pulled up. His eyes narrowed at the girls getting out of James's car. Mitchell, he called. Got a minute? Not right now, Dave. James guided the girls toward his front door. This about what people are saying? About you adopting, Dave? James's voice could have frozen water. Not now. Inside, Sarah immediately ran to look out the back windows. You have a garden. It needs work, James admitted. The roses are struggling. Mom grew roses, Jennifer said quietly, then caught herself and looked away. James showed them the house, 3 bedrooms upstairs, one he'd used as a study. This could be Sarah's room, he said. And you two could share the bigger one, or we could convert the study. Melissa ran her hand along a wall. It needs paint. The whole house needs work, James agreed. We could fix it up together, if you want. Make it yours. Nothing's ever really ours, Jennifer muttered. James's phone rang, his sister Helen. He stepped into the kitchen to answer. James. Helen's voice crackled. Patricia from church called me. Tell me you're not serious about this adoption thing. James watched through the kitchen door as Sarah discovered his old piano. I'm serious. You're too old to start raising teenagers. And they're, well, you know. People will talk. Let them. James, be reasonable. What would Maria think? He thought of Maria's empty garden, her quiet piano, her dreams of children. She'd tell me to fill this house with love. You're not thinking clearly. Sleep on it. Call me in the morning. Goodbye, Helen. He hung up. In the living room, Sarah picked out, Mary had a little lamb with one finger. Melissa examined the family photos on the wall. Jennifer stood by the window, watching Mr. Harris watch the house. We should go, Melissa said. James nodded. Think about it. No pressure. In the car back to the shelter, Sarah fell asleep. Jennifer stared out the window. Melissa broke the silence. Why do you really want to adopt us? James kept his eyes on the road. Because every time I walk into my empty house, I hear all the laughter that should be there. Because you three have so much love for each other, and I'd be honored to be part of that. People won't like it. People don't like a lot of things. Doesn't make them right. The next morning, Ms. Thompson called. The girls want to try. Mr. Mitchell, are you sure about this? James looked at his garden through the kitchen window. A single rose had bloomed overnight, bright against the morning sun. Yes. Then let's start the paperwork. He signed the first forms that afternoon, his hand steady despite his pounding heart. The initial home study would take weeks. The full adoption process could take months or even years. But that night, James moved his desk out of the study. He stood in the empty room, imagining bright paint, new beds, the sound of sisters laughing. We're really doing this, he told Maria's picture. The house creaked in response, but it didn't sound so empty anymore. Moving day came 6 weeks after the first signature. James watched the girls climb out of Ms. Thompson's car, each carrying a small bag. Everything they owned fit in 3 backpacks and 2 garbage bags. This is temporary, Ms. Thompson reminded everyone. A trial period before final adoption. We know the drill, Jennifer said, shifting her backpack. James unlocked the front door. Let's get you settled. Sarah ran straight upstairs to the room they painted yellow last weekend. The walls still smelled fresh, decorated with butterfly stickers she'd picked out at the hardware store. My room, she called down. My very own room. Melissa and Jennifer followed more slowly, carrying their bags to the converted study. 2 twin beds stood against opposite walls, with a shared desk between them. James had let them pick the paint color, a soft gray they'd agreed on after an hour of debate. Dinner in an hour, James said. I thought we could order pizza for our first night. Jennifer shrugged. Whatever. But when the pizzas arrived, 1 pepperoni, 1 vegetarian, because he'd noticed Jennifer never ate meat at the shelter, they all sat at the kitchen table. 4 plates. 4 glasses. 4 chairs filled for the first time in years. Sarah bit into her slice. We never got to eat in front of the TV at the other houses. We're not eating in front of the TV here either, James said. But you have one, right? Jennifer asked. In the living room. But dinner is for talking. Melissa set down her pizza. What are we supposed to talk about? Whatever you want. School starts next week. Are you excited? 3 different expressions answered him. Sarah's enthusiasm, Jennifer's scowl, and Melissa's carefully blank face. I get to stay in Mrs. Peterson's class, Sarah said. She said I could keep my same desk by the window. They're putting me in remedial classes, Jennifer muttered. Because I missed too much last year. James set down his napkin. We can work on catching up. I was a teacher. Remember? English, Melissa said. Jennifer needs help with math. I can get a tutor. Jennifer's pizza lay untouched. Don't waste your money. Education isn't a waste. James pushed the plate closer to her. Eat. We can talk about tutoring later. After dinner, James helped Sarah unpack her bag. 5 shirts, 3 pairs of pants, 2 sets of pajamas, and a worn teddy bear missing one eye. His name is Mr. Buttons, Sarah told him. Mom gave him to me. James set the bear carefully on her pillow. Then Mr. Buttons gets a special spot. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. James found Mrs. Baker from church on his porch, holding a casserole dish. I thought you could use a home-cooked meal, she said, peering past him. Are they settling in? We just had dinner, but thank you. James didn't move to let her in. The church community is concerned, James. Taking on 3 teenagers at your age, and with the cultural differences. Good night, Mrs. Baker. He closed the door on her stammered response. In the living room, he found Jennifer examining his CD collection. You like jazz? Maria did. My wife. He pulled out an album. This was her favorite. Soft music filled the room. Jennifer sat on the couch, arms wrapped around her knees. The last family sent us back because I got in a fight at school, she said suddenly. The one before that said we were too much work. The one before that only wanted Sarah. James sat in his armchair. I'm not sending you back. You say that now. I mean it. Upstairs, the shower started running. Melissa's voice drifted down, singing something James didn't recognize. The next morning brought the challenge of school registration. The secretary at Riverside Middle School looked from James to Jennifer and back again. You're her guardian? Yes. I have the paperwork here. She took the forms with 2 fingers. We'll need proof of residence, immunization records. It's all there. Jennifer slumped in her chair while the secretary made calls to verify everything. Twice. At the high school, Melissa handled her own registration. She stood straight back at the counter, answering questions clearly. But in the car afterward, her hands shook. They put me in all regular classes, she said. I had honors classes before Mom. We can talk to the counselor about switching, James offered. No. Regular is fine. I need to help with Sarah anyway. That's my job now. Melissa looked out the window. For now. The weekend brought shopping trips. The girls needed everything: clothes, school supplies, toiletries, shoes. James's credit card got a workout, but he didn't flinch at the register. Real shampoo, Jennifer marveled in the beauty aisle. Not the bulk stuff from the shelter. Can I get sparkly notebooks? Sarah bounced between backpack displays. One sparkly, James compromised. The rest regular. In the clothing section, Melissa kept checking price tags. This is too much money. You need clothes that fit. But, Melissa, James kept his voice gentle. Let me do this. At home, Sarah insisted on a fashion show. She twirled in new dresses while Melissa organized closets and Jennifer tested how her uniform looked with different hairstyles. Picture time, James announced, holding up his camera. No. Jennifer backed away. Just one. For the social worker's visit next week. They gathered reluctantly on the couch. James set the timer and hurried to join them. Smile, he said. The flash caught them. Sarah beaming, Melissa's slight smile, Jennifer's attempted scowl fighting a grin. James's heart caught at how right they looked there. That night brought the first test. Sarah's scream pierced the darkness at 2 a.m. James found all 3 girls in Sarah's room. The youngest sister thrashed in her sheets, crying for their mother. Melissa tried to calm her while Jennifer paced. She does this, Jennifer said. At every new place. James sat on the bed's edge. Sarah? You're safe. You're home. Mom. Sarah whimpered. I want Mom. I know. Sweetheart. He reached for her hand. I know. Melissa's arms tightened around her sister. Jennifer stopped pacing to watch James. Should I make hot chocolate? He offered. Maria, my wife, always said hot chocolate helps with bad dreams, Sarah hiccuped. With marshmallows. Extra marshmallows. They ended up in the kitchen at 2:30 a.m., 4 mugs of hot chocolate and a bag of marshmallows between them. Sarah's tears dried. Jennifer stopped watching James like he might disappear. Melissa's shoulders lowered from around her ears. Can we do this every time? Sarah asked. When I have bad dreams. James looked at his makeshift family around the kitchen table, all in pajamas, all clutching warm mugs like lifelines. Every time, he promised. Later, tucking Sarah back into bed, he heard Melissa whisper to Jennifer in the hallway. Maybe this time it's real. Don't, Jennifer whispered back. Don't hope yet. But when James checked on them an hour later, all 3 sisters slept soundly. Mr. Buttons the bear had migrated to Sarah's arms. Someone had left a marshmallow on James's nightstand with a post-it note. Thank you. The house settled around them, creaking its own lullaby. In the garden, the roses waited for morning, ready to try blooming again. The call came during James's afternoon garden work. Jennifer's school number flashed on his phone. Mr. Mitchell? This is Principal Warner. There's been an incident. James found Jennifer in the office, holding an ice pack to her knuckles. A white girl sat across the room, tissue pressed to her bleeding nose. She called us names, Jennifer said before James could speak. She said we were charity cases. That you only took us in for attention. Principal Warner cleared his throat. While Amanda's comments were inappropriate, violence is never the answer. What consequences is Amanda facing? James asked. Excuse me? For bullying. For racist comments. What's a punishment? We haven't verified those claims, but Jennifer threw the first punch. After weeks of harassment, Jennifer cut in. After she said, her voice cracked. James put a hand on her shoulder. We're leaving now. When you're ready to address the real problem here, call me. In the car, Jennifer's knuckles dripped blood onto her jeans. You're sending me back now, right? No. I got suspended. For 3 days. Yes. I hit someone. James pulled into their driveway. You stood up for yourself. But next time, we'll find a better way. Jennifer stared at him. There's no lecture? No punishment? Would it help? The other families always. I'm not the other families. Inside, James cleaned Jennifer's hands with peroxide. She didn't flinch. Amanda's mom is on the PTA, Jennifer said. She's going to make trouble. Let her try. The next morning brought the parent-teacher conference. James sat between Jennifer and Melissa, facing 5 teachers and the principal. Mrs. Peterson spoke first. Jennifer's math scores show significant gaps. From moving between schools, James said. And her attitude reflects her treatment here. James opened a notebook. Let's talk about the bullying incidents you've ignored. Warner coughed. Mr. Mitchell, we're here to discuss academic performance. We're here to discuss why my daughter doesn't feel safe in your school. Daughter. The word slipped out naturally. Jennifer's head snapped up. Your ward, Mrs. Peterson corrected. My daughter, James repeated firmly. The meeting deteriorated from there. Afterward, in the hallway, Melissa touched James's arm. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. At home, James found a letter from the city's housing department. Inspection required. Updates needed. Estimated costs made his stomach clench. The back stairs creaked dangerously. The upstairs bathroom leaked. The electrical system needed modernizing. All required for final adoption approval. James studied his bank account. Teacher's pension. Savings. Not enough. The phone rang. Ms. Thompson. Just checking in. Any concerns? James watched through the window as Jennifer helped Sarah with homework on the porch. None. The school called. We handled it. James, these incidents look bad for the adoption review. These incidents happen because no one stands up for them. But I will. That night, his chest tightened while carrying laundry upstairs. Just stress, he told himself. Just age. But the pain lingered. Melissa found him sitting on the top step, breathing hard. Are you okay? Fine. He forced a smile. Just winded. She didn't believe him. The next morning, James overheard her on the phone. I can get a job after school. Help with money. No, Jennifer, he doesn't know I'm applying. James's heart hurt worse than his chest. In the kitchen, he found Sarah's latest report card hidden under magazines. D in reading. Notes about concentration problems. The school counselor wanted a meeting. James sat in another tiny office, looking at another concerned face. Sarah's having trouble focusing, the counselor said. She falls asleep in class. She has nightmares and calls out for her mother. James nodded. She's processing grief. Have you considered therapy? Insurance doesn't cover it. The counselor's lips thinned. There are state programs that could flag concerns in the adoption review. James stood. I'll help her myself. That afternoon, the neighborhood watch committee appeared on his porch. Mrs. Baker and Mr. Harris stood front and center. We're concerned about property values, Mr. Harris said. James gripped the doorframe. Excuse me. Your house needs work, Mrs. Baker added. And the situation draws attention. My family draws attention. You mean? Now? James, he shut the door. Inside, Jennifer sat on the stairs. They want us gone. They don't matter. Everyone wants us gone eventually. James sat beside her. Not everyone. That night, the chest pain returned worse than before. James woke gasping at 3 a.m., sweat soaking his sheets. Sarah found him. Are you sick? No, sweetheart. Just tired. But his hands shook making breakfast. Melissa noticed. You need a doctor. I'm fine. Stop lying. Jennifer slammed a cereal bowl down. Everyone always lies. It's fine. You're safe. We're family. But it never lasts. Silence fell. Sarah started crying. I'm not lying, James said quietly. But I need you to trust me. Why should we? Jennifer stood. You're just like everyone else, making promises you can't keep. She ran upstairs. Melissa followed. Sarah crawled into James's lap like she used to do at story time. Are you going to leave us too? James held her close, ignoring the ache in his chest. Never. But that afternoon, lifting a box of books, the pain dropped him to his knees. His vision blurred. Melissa's voice came from far away. Jennifer, call 911. James tried to speak, to reassure them. Black spots danced. The last thing he saw was Sarah's face, tears falling. The last thing he heard was Jennifer's voice, suddenly young and scared. Dad? Dad, please. Then darkness took him, and the carefully built world of their new family began to crack at its foundations. The hospital corridor stretched endless and white. Jennifer paced while Melissa held Sarah, who had finally cried herself to sleep. Mild heart attack, the doctor told them. Is stable. Ms. Thompson arrived minutes later, heels clicking on linoleum. Girls, we need to talk. We're not leaving him, Jennifer said. This is serious. Mr. Mitchell's health, James, Melissa corrected. His name is James. James's condition raises concerns about his ability to care for you. Sarah stirred. No. There's a good foster family in? No. Sarah broke from Melissa's arms. We're staying with Dad. The word hung in the air. Ms. Thompson's face softened. It's not that simple, sweetie. 2 days later, James came home to an unexpected visitor. Ms. Thompson stood in his living room, notebook open. Surprise inspection, she said. James's chest still ached. I have 2 weeks medical leave to recover from a heart attack. She walked the room, noting peeling wallpaper, while caring for 3 active girls. I'm fine. The school called again. Jennifer's grades, she's adjusting, and Sarah's nightmares are normal for trauma, and Melissa's secret job applications. James stiffened. What? The grocery store called to verify her reference. Ms. Thompson sighed. James, be reasonable. Your health, the house repairs, the school issues. It's too much. Get out. Excuse me. Get out of my house. His voice shook. Unless you have a court order, get out. She left, but her words remained. That afternoon, Jennifer didn't come home from school. 3 o'clock passed. Then 4. She does this, Melissa said. When she's scared we're being sent back. James called the school. No one had seen her since lunch. 5 o'clock. Sarah watched from the window. Is Ginny coming back? Of course she is. But James's hands shook dialing the police. 6 o'clock. Police took a report. Probably just a runaway, they said. She'll turn up. 7 o'clock. Melissa broke. This is your fault. She hurled a couch pillow across the room. You got sick. You promised to take care of us, but you're just like Mom. Leaving us. Melissa, no. I can't do this again. I can't keep watching everyone leave. I can't keep being strong for them. I'm 16. I'm just 16. She collapsed, sobbing. James held her while she hit his chest with weak fists. Sarah crawled between them. Please don't cry, Lissa. Please. The door opened. Jennifer stood there, makeup smeared. Jenny. Sarah ran to her. Where were you? James asked quietly. The cemetery. With Mom. Jennifer's voice cracked. I needed to ask her if we should leave before you send us away. I'm not sending you away. You're sick. I'm getting better. You don't know that. Jennifer's scream startled them all. Mom said she was getting better too. She promised, but she died and left us and everyone leaves and she ran upstairs. Something shattered. The school counselor called for an emergency session the next day. All four of them sat in her office. There's clearly trauma here, she said. We're handling it, James replied. Are you? Jennifer's fighting. Melissa's breaking down. Sarah's failing. They need time. They need stability. I am stable. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Carson from Child Services entered. We received a complaint, she said. From a neighbor. James's stomach dropped. Mr. Harris. He reported, shouting. Objects breaking. Concerns about the children's safety. That's not, Jennifer started. And given Mr. Mitchell's health. Melissa stood. You can't take us. Honey, we're just, no. Sarah grabbed James's arm. Is our dad now? You can't. Mrs. Carson looked at her notes. The adoption isn't final. Given the circumstances. Get out. Jennifer's voice was ice. All of you get out or I swear I'll run away for real this time. And I'll take them with me. The counselor tried to speak. Jennifer cut her off. You don't care about us. None of you ever cared. You just want to check your boxes and feel good about saving us. But James. Her voice broke. James actually loves us. Silence fell. 2 weeks, Mrs. Carson said finally. We'll reassess in 2 weeks. But if anything else happens. They left. In the car home, no one spoke. That night, James found Melissa at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. College applications, she said. Due next week. You should submit them. No point. We won't be here. Melissa, I got a job. At the grocery store. I can help with bills. That's not your job. Taking care of them is my job. It's always been my job. James sat down. Not anymore. You can't promise that. You're sick. I had a mild heart attack. I'm on medication. I'm doing rehab. I'm not dying. Mom said that too. The truth hit finally. James took Melissa's hands. I'm not your mom. I can't replace her. But I'm here. And I'm fighting to stay here. I just need you to believe in me a little longer. Melissa's college essay sat between them, dreams penned in careful handwriting. 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks to prove them wrong. Upstairs, Sarah screamed in her sleep. They heard Jennifer's footsteps, then quiet murmurs. James touched the college applications. Submit these. Please. But, promise me, no matter what happens, you'll submit them. Melissa looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. In the garden, the roses James had planted after Maria died were blooming despite the coming winter. Stubborn things, roses. They grew even when everyone said they couldn't. Like family. Like love. Like hope in the darkest places. The morning started with burnt toast and Sarah's tears. I can make more, James said, scraping black crumbs into the sink. His hands trembled slightly. You're supposed to rest, Melissa reminded him, taking the knife. Doctor's orders. I can make my own breakfast, Sarah insisted. James sat heavily at the kitchen table. The morning pills sat in their little plastic organizer. Heart medication, blood pressure, anti-anxiety. More medications than he'd ever taken in his life. Jennifer watched him swallow each one. Does it hurt? No. The lie came easily now. Stop lying. She grabbed her backpack. I'm walking to school. It's raining. I don't care. The door slammed. James started to stand, but dizziness hit. He gripped the table edge. Melissa saw. I'll go after her. No, I. The room spun. His chest tightened. Sarah screamed. Dad! The floor rushed up to meet him. Somewhere far away, he heard Melissa on the phone. Yes, it's happening again. 1247, Oak Street. Please hurry. Sarah's face appeared above him, tears falling. Don't leave us. Don't leave us. Jennifer's voice, closer now. I came back. I'm here. Dad, stay with us. Darkness came in waves. The hospital ceiling looked familiar. Different room, same fluorescent lights. 3 faces watched him wake. His daughters, all with red-rimmed eyes. Another mild episode, the doctor explained later. The stress. I'm fine. James tried to sit up. You're not. Jennifer's voice cracked. Stop saying you're fine. The doctor checked James's charts. You need rest. Real rest. And less stress. I have 3 teenagers, James said. Define less stress. No one smiled. That afternoon, the girls huddled in the hospital corridor while social workers met in James's room. He heard raised voices. Temporary placement. Out of the question. Mr. Mitchell, be reasonable. Get out. More voices joined. Doctors, nurses, administrators. Papers shuffled. Words like unfit and risk floated through the door. In the hallway, the girls pressed together on a plastic bench. Other families passed, giving them looks. 3 black girls outside a white man's hospital room. Security guards watched too closely. We should go, Melissa said finally. No. Jennifer's fists clenched. It's not working, Jenny. It is. He loves us. Love isn't enough. Melissa's voice broke. Mom loved us too, but she still. Sarah started crying again. Inside the room, James heard everything. His heart monitor beeped faster. A nurse noticed. Girls, you need to leave. No. 3 voices together. Hospital policy. Jennifer stood. That's our father. The word echoed. Staff stared. Visitors whispered. Please, Sarah begged. Please let us stay. The nurse looked at her clipboard, then at the girls. Something softened in her face. 5 minutes. Then visiting hours are over. They filed in. James tried to smile. I'm sorry, he said. Don't. Jennifer took his hand. Just don't. Melissa stood by the window. We have a plan. No. We can get jobs. All of us. Help with bills. Your children. We're survivors. Jennifer squeezed his hand. Let us help. Your job is school. Future. Dreams. Our job is family, Sarah said quietly. The word hung there, heavy with meaning. Later, alone in his room, James called Helen. The girls need a place to stay, he said. Just until. No. Helen, please. This is exactly why we said not to adopt them. You're not well, James. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I'm their father. You're their temporary guardian who had a heart attack. He hung up. The next morning brought more meetings. Doctors, social workers, therapists, all with concerns, all with forms. Then the girls arrived with a surprise. Family therapy, Melissa announced. James blinked at the young woman with them. Dr. Carter, she introduced herself. The girls found me. I work with adoptive families. We can't afford pro bono. Dr. Carter sat down. These girls are pretty persuasive. For the next hour, they talked. Really talked. About fear and loss and love and hope. Mom died slowly, Jennifer said finally. Cancer. She promised she'd get better. I'm not dying, James said. Everyone dies. Sarah burst out. Everyone leaves. Dr. Carter leaned forward. What if we focus on now? On what you can do together? They made lists. Changes. Compromises. Melissa would drop one honors class, reducing stress. Jennifer would try counseling for anger. Sarah would sleep in James's room temporarily. James would accept help, rest more, delegate. Small steps, Dr. Carter said. Day by day. That afternoon, something shifted. The girls brought schoolwork to the hospital. They did homework while James rested. When he woke, they were still there. We're not leaving, Jennifer said simply. A nurse brought extra chairs without being asked. The social workers came back with more forms. The girls stood united. He's getting better, Melissa said. We're helping, Sarah added. We're family, Jennifer finished. The words carried weight now. Meaning. Truth. That night, James woke to find all 3 girls asleep in hospital chairs. Sarah clutched Mr. Buttons. Jennifer held James's hand. Melissa had college applications spread across her lap. The night nurse smiled. They refuse to go. They are stubborn. They are yours. The words settled in his chest, warmer than any medicine. The next day, Dr. Carter brought news. The Adoption Review Board agreed to postpone decisions. Focus on recovery first. But, James started. Together, she said firmly. You do this together. The girls nodded. United. Strong. James looked at his family, because that's what they were, papers or not, and felt something unlock in his chest. Not healing. Not yet. But hope. Real hope. The kind that grows in darkness. The kind that blooms like roses in winter. The kind that makes families out of broken pieces and love out of loss. Together, he agreed. Outside the window, rain fell. But inside, in a hospital room filled with homework and snoring teenagers and college dreams, the storm began to pass. They had weathered worse. They would weather more. They would do it together. 2 weeks after James came home from the hospital, the girls launched their plan. Keep your eyes closed, Sarah insisted, leading James down the basement stairs. Careful, Melissa steadied him. One more step. What's going on? James asked. Just wait, Jennifer said. The basement light clicked on. Open. James blinked. The once cluttered space had transformed. Fresh paint brightened the walls. New lighting fixtures chased away shadows. 3 desks lined one wall, each with a lamp and chair. Bookshelves held textbooks and novels. A small couch sat in the corner with colorful pillows. Our study space, Melissa explained, so you can rest upstairs. How did you? The church helped, Jennifer said, when they actually listened. And Mr. Harris, Sarah added. James turned. Mr. Harris. He's good at electrical work, Melissa said. When we explained, he wanted to help. James touched a desk. His savings had stretched thin with medical bills. This must have cost. Don't worry about money, Jennifer said, reading his mind. We did fundraising. Fundraising. Car wash. Bake sale. Mrs. Baker's really good at organizing those. Mrs. Baker. Sarah bounced. Show him the best part. They led him to a corner where a small table held a framed photo, James and the girls in the garden, from their first week together. Below it, a plaque read, the Mitchell family study room. Mitchell, James said softly. That's us now, Sarah said. Right. James hugged them, careful of his healing heart. That's us. Later that week, Jennifer came home with a project folder. Black History Month display, she explained. We're supposed to do family heritage. James looked up from his medication organizer. Oh, I want to do it right. Jennifer sat at the kitchen table. Will you? Will you help me research? The local library offered cultural history classes. James signed them both up. You don't have to, Jennifer said. I want to learn, James replied. About your heritage, your culture, everything. They spent Saturday mornings learning together. James took notes. Jennifer asked questions. They brought the information home to share. Mom used to make this, Jennifer said one day, showing James a recipe for soul food. Can we try? The kitchen became a laboratory. James learned new spices, new techniques. Sometimes they failed spectacularly. But sometimes, tastes like home, Melissa said after one dinner. A new home, Sarah added. With old memories. The nightmares came less frequently now. When they did, Sarah climbed into James's bed without hesitation. Sometimes Jennifer and Melissa joined them, all watching late-night TV together. Mom would like this, Sarah said during one midnight gathering. Us being happy again. One morning, Melissa checked the mail and screamed. Everyone ran outside. She held a thick envelope. Stanford, she whispered. Early acceptance. They framed the acceptance letter in the study room. I can't go, Melissa said that night. It's too far. Too expensive. You can and you will. James showed her the college fund papers. I've been saving since the first day. But I promise to take care of you. That includes your future. Melissa hugged him hard enough to hurt. Spring brought more changes. The garden needed work after James's hospital stay. We'll help, Jennifer said. They learned together which plants needed sun, which needed shade, how to prune roses. Mom loved roses too, Sarah said, patting soil around a new bush. Tell me about her, James said. So they did. While working in the garden, stories flowed. Happy memories. Sad ones. All the moments that made them who they were. She sang in the kitchen. She couldn't draw but tried anyway. She loved thunderstorms. James listened, learning the woman who had given him his daughters. The adoption review loomed closer. This time, they were ready. Dr. Carter's reports showed progress. School records showed improvement. Even Mr. Harris wrote a letter of support. They belong together, he wrote. They belong here. The day of the review, James's chest felt tight. But not from his heart. Scared? Jennifer asked in the car. Terrified, James admitted. She took his hand. Us too. The review board examined their file. Questions came rapid fire. Medical stability, financial planning, educational support, cultural integration, family cohesion. They answered together, voices strong. In the hallway during deliberation, Sarah played cards with Jennifer while Melissa reviewed Stanford housing forms. Whatever happens, James said, I love you. We know, they answered. Together, the board called them back. Papers shuffled. Throats cleared. The level of improvement is remarkable, the head reviewer said. The family bond evident. More papers. There are still concerns. Sarah grabbed James's hand. But Jennifer held her breath. The adoption is approved. The room exploded. Tears, hugs, laughter. On one condition, the reviewer added. They froze. Regular check-ins. Continued therapy. Preventative medical care. Deal. 4 voices said together. Outside, spring sun warmed their faces. New roses bloomed in their garden across town. Ice cream, James suggested. Before dinner, Melissa raised an eyebrow. Special occasion. They crowded into their favorite diner booth. The waitress knew them now. The usual. Extra sprinkles, Sarah said. We're celebrating. Oh. Jennifer sat straighter. We're officially the Mitchells now. The waitress smiled. Honey, you always were. That night, James found a new photo frame in the study room. Empty. For the adoption certificate, Melissa explained. When it comes. When, James agreed. Sarah yawned. Story time. They piled onto James's bed like always. But tonight felt different. Permanent. Once upon a time, James began. There was a lonely man with an empty house. And 3 girls who needed a home, Jennifer continued. And they found each other, Melissa added. And became family, Sarah finished. James looked at his daughters, really his now, legally, finally, and felt his heart. Not the damaged muscle that had tried to stop him. The other heart. The one that had grown 3 sizes bigger. The one that beat with love. 1 year passed like a heartbeat. James marked the date on the kitchen calendar. Family anniversary. Can't believe it's been a year, Jennifer said, pouring cereal. Best year, Sarah added around a mouthful of toast. Melissa checked her phone. School talent show tonight. Don't forget. James looked up from his pills. As if we could. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement. James sat between Jennifer and Melissa, program clutched in his hands. Next up, the principal announced, Sarah Mitchell, performing Bridge Over Troubled Water. Sarah stepped onto the stage in her yellow dress. The piano waited. That's Mom's song, Jennifer whispered. James reached for her hand. Sarah's fingers touched the keys. Music filled the space. Her voice, clear and strong, carried the melody their mother had loved. When you're weary, feeling small, in the audience, Jennifer wiped her eyes. Melissa filmed with shaking hands. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. James watched his youngest daughter shine under the spotlight. The scared little girl from the shelter had bloomed into this confident performer. Standing ovation. Sarah beamed. Afterward, in the hallway, Mrs. Baker appeared with flowers. Beautiful performance, she said. Your mother would be proud. Sarah hugged the bouquet. Both my moms the next morning brought another milestone. James walked into the community center, Jennifer beside him. Welcome to Cultural Awareness and Understanding, the instructor said. I'm Dr. Williams. Twice a week, they learned together. Black history, cultural traditions, current issues. Why are you doing this? Another participant asked James during break. To understand my daughters better. Must be hard, raising black kids at your age. The only hard part was almost losing them. At home, Jennifer started a project wall. Photos, articles, family tree stretching back generations. Mom's side goes to Louisiana, she explained. Before that, Georgia, James absorbed everything, asked questions, learned. The garden became their laboratory for growth. Each girl chose plants: Sarah's sunflowers, Jennifer's vegetables, Melissa's herbs. "The roses are all of us," Sarah declared, helping James prune. Different colors but same family. Spring brought college decisions. Melissa's Stanford acceptance remained firm, joined by 5 other offers. "I still don't know," she said late one night. James found her in the study room. Acceptance letters spread out. "Stanford's your dream. It's so far. That's what phones are for. And video calls. And holidays. But Sarah, we'll be fine. Jennifer too." Melissa twisted her acceptance letter. "Will you? I'm not alone anymore." James smiled. "None of us are." The next week, Jennifer came home transformed. "I know what I want to do," she announced at dinner. "Besides eat all the mashed potatoes." Sarah teased. "I want to help kids. Like us." "But before," James set down his fork. Before it gets bad. Before they get split up. I want to be a social worker." Silence fell. "What?" Jennifer challenged. "Think I can't?" "I think," James said carefully, "you'd be amazing." "Really? You understand both sides now. The system, the kids, the families." Jennifer's smile could have lit the city. That weekend, their neighbor Mr. Harris knocked. "Having a barbecue," he said. "Would your family like to come?" The word family sat naturally in his mouth now. The neighborhood gathered in Mr. Harris's backyard. Kids played. Adults talked. "Remember when we were worried about property values?" Mrs. Baker said to James. "Remember when you tried to stop the adoption?" She had the grace to look ashamed. "We were wrong. This neighborhood's better with your family in it." Sarah ran past, chasing Mr. Harris's grandson with a water balloon. "Watch your heart rate," Jennifer called to James. "I'm fine," he laughed. "You always say that." Because it's true now. His last checkup had shown improvement. Regular exercise, less stress, more joy, better medicine than pills. That night, watching TV together, Sarah asked, "Can we go to Mom's grave tomorrow?" James looked at his daughters. Of course. The cemetery was peaceful in morning light. They brought roses, yellow for Sarah, pink for Jennifer, red for Melissa. "Hey, Mom," Sarah touched the headstone. "We're okay now." "Better than okay. We have a dad," Jennifer added. "A real one." Melissa laid her roses. "And we're not alone anymore." James stood back, giving them space with their mother. The woman who'd given him the greatest gift, the chance to be a father. Back home, Sarah pulled out a photo album. "Look what I found in the attic." Pictures of their mother filled the pages. Young, healthy, smiling. "She's got your smile," James told Jennifer. "And Melissa's eyes," Sarah said. "And your laugh," Melissa added. They spent the afternoon sharing stories. Happy ones now, not just sad. Remember her burnt cookies? And her silly dance moves? The way she sang off-key? James listened, learning more about the woman who'd raised such amazing daughters. That evening, the neighborhood association had their monthly meeting. James watched his girls work the room. Sarah charmed everyone's grandparents. Jennifer discussed youth programs with the council. Melissa shared Stanford news with proud neighbors. "Quite a change," Mr. Harris said, joining James. "The neighborhood or my family?" "Both. We're all growing. Like their garden. Like their hearts." Later, James found Jennifer in the study room, surrounded by social work program brochures. "Stanford has a good program," she said casually. "Near your sister?" "Maybe. If that's okay." James hugged her. "More than okay." Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Story time?" Some traditions never changed. They gathered on James's bed. The same bed where they'd weathered nightmares, celebrated victories, built their bond. "Tell the story about how we became a family," Sarah requested. "Again," Jennifer teased. "Always," Melissa said. James looked at his daughters, strong, beautiful, healing, and began. "Once upon a time." But they all knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. The community center buzzed with anticipation. James adjusted his tie while Sarah straightened his collar. "Stop fidgeting," Jennifer said. "You look fine." "More than fine," Melissa added, checking her phone. "They're ready for us." Inside, the room was packed. School board members, social workers, neighbors, friends. A banner hung above the stage, Community Service Excellence Awards. I still don't understand why we're here, James whispered. His daughters exchanged knowing looks. Principal Warner took the podium. Today we recognize those who've made extraordinary contributions to our community. James settled in for what he assumed would be a long ceremony. Sarah squeezed his hand. Our final award, Warner continued, goes to a family that transformed not just themselves, but our entire community's understanding of what family means. Jennifer sat straighter. 2 years ago, a retired teacher made a decision that many called impossible. Today, the Mitchell family shows us that love knows no boundaries. James stopped breathing. But this award isn't just about their family. It's about the changes they inspired. Warner gestured to the screen behind him. Images appeared. The study room project that sparked a community center renovation. Jennifer's cultural awareness program now implemented in local schools. Melissa's college mentoring program for foster kids. Sarah's music therapy sessions at the children's shelter. Mr. James Mitchell and his daughters, please come forward. They walked to the stage together. James's chest felt tight, but not from his heart condition. Thanks to their advocacy, Warner continued, our school district has implemented new anti-bullying policies, cultural sensitivity training, and support systems for adoptive families. The Mitchell Foundation Scholarship Program has helped 10 foster children attend college this year alone. James turned to Melissa. What foundation? She smiled. Surprise. Using my Stanford business classes, she explained later. We registered as a non-profit. The community donations, the fundraising, it's all going to help other families like us. The award itself was simple, a glass plaque with their names. But the real surprise came after. We have an announcement, Jennifer said at the podium. I've been accepted into Stanford's social work program. James grabbed the podium for support. With a full scholarship, she continued. I'll be working with the county's foster care reform initiative while studying. Sarah stepped up next. And I'm starting a music program at the shelter. Where Dad found us. The audience applauded, but James barely heard. His daughters had planned this, all of it. At home that evening, they gathered in the garden. The roses bloomed fuller than ever. There's one more surprise, Melissa said. She handed James an envelope. Inside, he found a deed. We bought Mrs. Baker's house, Jennifer explained. When she moves to Florida next month. You what? For the foundation, Sarah said. A transition home for families like us, where kids can stay together while waiting for adoption. James looked at the deed, then at his daughters. How did you? The whole community helped, Melissa said. Once they understood. Mr. Harris is handling renovations, Jennifer added. And I'm going to paint murals. Sarah bounced. In every room. James sat on the garden bench. When did you all grow up so much? While you were busy saving us, Jennifer said. Teaching us, Melissa added. Loving us, Sarah finished. That night, they received an unexpected visitor. Ms. Thompson, their original social worker. I owe you an apology, she said. All of you? She held up a file. I've been asked to teach a course on successful adoptions. Would you mind if I used your story? James looked at his daughters. They nodded. Tell them everything, Jennifer said. The hard parts too. So they understand, Melissa added. That family isn't about matching. It's about love, Sarah said. Later, after ice cream and stories, James found Melissa in the study room. Stanford orientation next week, she said. Jennifer's going with you. Figured we'd help each other settle in. She paused. Sure you'll be okay. Sarah and I will visit every month, James promised. And holidays. We'll be here, Jennifer said from the doorway. All of us. Always. Sarah appeared with Mr. Buttons, now missing both eyes but still beloved. Tell the story again, she requested. About how we became family. They settled into their usual spots. The story flowed, but different now. Not just about how they found each other, but what they built together. A home. A foundation. A future. James looked at his daughters, women now, strong and sure, and remembered 3 scared girls in a shelter. You know what Mom would say? Jennifer asked suddenly. What? She'd say we got lucky twice. 2 parents who'd do anything for us. 3 parents, Melissa corrected. Mom's still watching. Sarah nodded. From the garden, they all looked out the window where roses bloomed in darkness, sturdy and strong. Like family. Like love. You know, James said, I thought I was rescuing you. But we rescued each other, Jennifer finished. The adoption certificate hung on the wall, but they hadn't needed it to know. Family was family, papers or not. And their family had grown beyond blood, beyond race, beyond all the boundaries others had tried to set. It had grown into something more, into everything. Sarah yawned against James's shoulder. Jennifer checked flight details for Stanford. Melissa made lists for the foundation. Normal things. Family things. Dad? Sarah asked sleepily. Are you happy? James looked at his daughters. At the life they'd built. At the future they'd create. More than happy, he said. I'm blessed. Outside, the roses turned their faces to the stars, blooming endless and bright. Inside, a family held each other close, knowing that love, real love, could bridge any distance, heal any heart, and create miracles. Even out of broken pieces, even against all odds, even when the whole world said impossible. Because family, true family, finds a way. Always.